Hi.
I never thought I'd be here. If anyone had told me a year ago where my life was going, I would have laughed at them. But there I stood, in my kitchen, staring at the suitcase in the hallway. His suitcase. My sister's son had moved in with us. It was not supposed to be permanent, just until she was up and running again after the divorce. He was 21 and struggling to get his own life organized. My husband worked most hours away from home, so having someone else around the house was a good idea, at first. The early weeks were routine. We got into a rhythm: coffee in the morning, casual work chatter, dining together when work permitted. He was polite, affable, appreciative of having a roof over his head. Then they altered. I started to pick up on small things. The way he'd hold a gaze a fraction of a second too long. How he'd find reasons to stand near me, brushing past in the kitchen or standing too close. The way his voice softened when he said my name. It wasn't overt, not quite enough to mention it, but it was there. A subtle shift. I reminded myself that I was dreaming, that I was reading too much into innocent interactions. Something within me, however, was not deceived. And then there was the evening I came home earlier than I usually would. He was outside in the yard, repairing it. The light of the golden hour softened and warmed everything. He had his sleeves rolled up, his shirt sweat dampened from the heat. I slowed before heading outside, my hand tight on the doorframe. And in that instant, something in my stomach turned. A warning, perhaps. A sense that whatever was going on between us wasn't just in my mind. I should have left that night, shut the door, pushed the thought from my head, and acted like I never saw anything. But I didn't. A few days later, we were both on the back porch. My husband was off again, and the house was even more quiet than usual. I had sat down with a glass of wine and he joined me. It wasn't intentional. It just happened. There was a weight of tension between us, the gentle buzz of crickets filling the gap. We discussed nothing and everything: his plans, his problems, my job, my marriage. I don't know how, but the discussion changed. He asked me if I was happy. A simple question, but it seemed like it had more significance than it should have had. I joked it off, gave some perfunctory answer, but his eyes remained on me, waiting. Then, beneath the table, his knee touched mine. Little, unnoticeable, but I felt it like a jolt of lightning. I might have pulled back. Should have, but I didn't. I reassured myself that it was nothing, an accident. But gazing at him, I saw it. The awareness, the unspoken question between us. I rose, apologized, and entered. But even when I went to bed that night, I knew that something had changed. Avoidance was my new strategy. I kept busy, left the house early, stayed out late. When I was at home, I made sure there was always space between us. No more midnight conversations, no more loitering. It was the only way of keeping everything in check. But it didn't work. I had gone into the garage one night, assuming it would be empty. But he was there, fixing something on the workbench. He glanced up when he heard me come in, wiping his hands with a rag. "You've been avoiding me," he said. His voice was smooth, but there was something beneath it, something not to be read. I attempted to laugh. "Don't be silly." He just looked at me, waiting. The tension in the air was palpable. "This has to stop," I finally said, my voice lighter than I had intended. He breathed deliberately. "Then stop it." He wasn't teasing me. He wasn't goading. But the way he said it, with such finality as if it was really all up to me, knotting things inside me. I should have turned and walked away. But I stood there, immobile, caught between sense and something far darker. And in that moment, I realized I had no notion on which side I wanted to be victorious. I told myself it would not occur, that no matter how close we were to the edge, I would not let us plunge. But some moments are stronger than reason, and that night I stopped fighting. The house was silent. I went outside for some air, believing I was by myself, but he was already there. He gazed at me, and I knew. No words, no doubt. It just happened. It was quick, but unmistakable. A moment that changed everything. The instant it was done, reality came crashing down on me. I took a step back, my breathing uneven, heart racing in my chest. This is wrong, I breathed, more to myself than to him. He didn't argue with it. He didn't try to convince me otherwise. He just stood there, watching as I turned and entered the house. I locked the door behind me, as if that would turn back what had happened. But I knew the truth. I had let it happen. I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. The morning after was different. It was weighty. The previous night stayed with me as I moved about the house, my mind racing with all that I had accomplished. I should have felt guilt, maybe even regret. But what scared me was that I didn't. Not yet. I had expected to see him in the kitchen, drinking his usual coffee like everything was normal. But the house was empty. No creaking up the stairs, no rumble of the garage. My stomach churned as I walked down the hall, and then I saw it. His bag was gone. On the counter, a note. A couple of sentences, scrawled in his sloppy writing. I had to leave. Please don't hate me. The breath had left my lungs. I reread it, slowly, as if the words would change magically. He was gone. I should have been relieved. This was the good thing, wasn't it? The getting out before things got bad. But standing there holding this note in my hand, all I felt was a hollowness where something had once been. I replayed every moment. The stolen looks, the close encounters, the night on the porch when things shifted. It wasn't supposed to have occurred, and yet it had. And now, I had the aftermath to sort through, alone. Days passed, then a week. I told myself I was getting on with it, that I'd left it in the ground. But one evening, sitting outside watching the sunset, my phone vibrated. A text message. I have no idea how to fix this, but I can't let it go. About you. I seethed in front of the screen, my heart pounding. A million things went through my head, but only one stuck. This wasn't over. This is an artistic and fictional creation intended for both entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to actual people or events is purely coincidental. Some scenes and dialogues in the video are part of a dramatized performance and incorporate elements of grotesque, satire, and exaggeration. The creator stands against discrimination, violence, and hatred. This channel fully complies with YouTube's policies and does not infringe upon copyright laws.
Why?